Hey people, it's not a story. This is a story that some of you may have heard of, so I've decided to cover it as well. This is justice for Ahmed Arbery. So this is from the New York Times. Two weapons in chase, a killing, and no charges. A 25-year-old man running through a Georgia neighborhood ended up dead. The prosecutor argued that pursuers should not be arrested. Brunswick, Georgia, Ahmed Arbery loved to run. It was how the 25-year-old former high school football student standout stayed fit. His friend said it was not unusual to see him running around the outskirts of a small Georgia city near where he lived. On a Sunday afternoon in February, Mr. Arbery ran through a suburban neighborhood of ranch houses, moss-draped oaks. He passed a man standing in his front yard who later told the police that Mr. Arbery looked like the suspect in a string of break-ins. According to a police report, the man, Gregory McMichael, 64, called out to his son, Travis McMichael, 34. They grabbed their weapons, a .357 Magnum revolver and a shotgun, jumped into a truck and began following Mr. Arbery. Stop, stop, they shouted at Mr. Arbery. We want to talk to you. Moments later, after a struggle over the shotgun, Mr. Arbery was killed, shot at least twice. I don't believe that there was a struggle. I think they just attacked him straight up. No one has been charged or arrested in connection with the February 23rd killing. The case has received little attention beyond Brunswick, but has raised questions in the community about racial profiling. Mr. Arbery was black, and the father and son were white, and the interpretation of state's defense laws. Sounds like a lynching. It reminds me of the old days where, well, really, the old days have never gone away, but you know what I mean. Just see someone black, get in a truck, and get them. The Reverend John Davis Perry II, the president of the Brunswick chapter of the NAACP, has called the shooting troubling. Troubling. Man, he sounds like he's having a mild illness the way he's talking about it. And Mr. Arbery's friends and family have worried that the case, similar to others that prompted nationwide outrage, might quietly disappear in the Deep South community because social distancing restrictions amid the coronavirus outbreak have made it difficult for them to gather and protest. We can't do anything because this corona stuff, said Wanda Cooper, Mr. Arbery's mother. We thought about walking out where the shooting occurred, just doing a little march, but we can't be out right now. Mr. Arbery was killed 3 days before the anniversary of the 2012 killing of Trayvon Martin, the unarmed African-American teenager whose confrontation with a Florida neighborhood watch captain, George Zimmerman, helped ignite the Black Lives Matter movement. According to documents obtained by the New York Times, the prosecutor who had the case for a few weeks told the police that the pursuer had acted within the scope of the Georgia Citizens Arrest Statute, and that Travis McMichael, who held the shotgun, had acted out of self-defense. No, that can't be self-defense. He was running past their house and they got in a car and chased after him. By definition, that cannot be self-defense. You initiate a confrontation. Same with Zimmerman. You follow someone and initiate a confrontation. That's not a self-defense. That's starting a fight and then using lethal force to end it. Attempts to reach Gregory McMichael, a retired investigator in a district attorney's office, were unsuccessful. In a brief phone conversation, Travis McMichael, who runs a company that gives custom boat tours, declined to comment, citing the continuing investigation. The prosecutor who wrote the letter, George E. Barnhill, the district attorney for Georgia's Waycross Judicial Circuit, recused himself from the case this month after Mr. Arbery's family complained that he had a conflict of interest. A prosecutor from another county is now in charge and will determine whether the case should be presented to a grand jury. In and around Brunswick, activists and allies of Mr. Arbery's family are doing what they can to organize online. They have started a Facebook page and have coordinated the pressure campaigns, emailing law enforcement officials and the local newspapers. There are hashtags #IRunWithMaud and hashtag Justice for Ahmed, AHMAUD, and t-shirts have been printed. But few people are on the streets to see their message. There are a lot of people absolutely ready to protest, said Jason Vaughan, a red football coach at Brunswick High School, who coached Mr. Arbery, who was an outside linebacker. Because of social distancing and being safe, you have to watch what's going on with the coronavirus. Mr. Arbery was killed in Satilla Shores, a quiet middle-class enclave that abuts a network of marshlands about 15 minutes from downtown Brunswick and a short jog from Mr. Arbery's neighborhood. His friends and family said they believe Mr. Arbery, who was wearing a white t-shirt, khaki shorts, Nike sneakers, and a bandana when he was killed, had been out exercising. Everybody in the community knows he runs, said Mr. Vaughan, who said he saw Mr. Arbery jogging on the street a few months ago. Mr. Vaughan said that he himself had raised suspicions by jogging through his own neighborhood in the suburbs of Brunswick, recalling a recent instance in which a white woman followed him in a van. But others contend that Mr. Arbery was up to no good. Oh, here we go. A big black boogeyman running around. On the day of the shooting, and apparently moments before the chase, a neighbor in Satilla Shores called 911, telling the dispatcher that a black man in a white t-shirt was inside the house that was under construction and only partially closed in. And he's running right now, the man told the dispatcher. There he goes right now. In his letter to the police, Mr. Barnhill, the prosecutor, noted that Mr. Arbery had a criminal past. Oh, now here we go. Anything that you have done will be dragged up to defame you. Court records show that Mr. Arbery was convicted of shoplifting and of violating probation in 2018. So shoplifting is now a justification for murder. Okay, that's the way they want to play it. 5 years earlier, according to the Brunswick News, he was indicted on charges that he took a handgun to a high school basketball game. Still, even if Mr. Arbery committed a property crime on the afternoon he was killed, activists and family members said he would not have warranted a chase by armed neighbors. Man, this article seems like a hit job, talking about, well, there were people in the neighborhood and previous charges. You know, have you noticed when they do it, when white people are killed by the police, they never drag up things they've done, like, what was it, that white woman Justine Diamond in Minneapolis? There was no investigation of her at all, or was she on drugs or anything. They just gloss over them. They're just these innocent people who were brutalized by these beasts, and you know what I mean. This incident was at the least a case of overly zealous citizens that wrongfully profiled the victim without cause, Mr. Perry wrote in an email. These men felt justified in taking the law in their own hand. Miss Cooper, Miss Arbery's mother, said she believed the men had judged her son by his skin color, and she does not believe he committed any crimes that day. If he had, she said, he should have been handled by the police. Miss Cooper pushed for Mr. Barnhill, a veteran prosecutor, to recuse himself from the case after she learned that his son works in the Brunswick District Attorney's Office, which had previously employed Gregory McMichael. The Brunswick District Attorney, Jackie Johnson, recused herself early on, also because Mr. McMichael had worked in her office. She believes there are kinships between the parties that there are not. Actually, yes, there is a kinship. If you work with someone, you have a bias, and has made other unfounded allegation of biases. Yes, they are founded. If you work with someone, you are bound to take their side. You cannot be impartial. This is just obvious common sense. Mr. Barnhill wrote in his letter sent in early April to the Glynn County Police Department. As such, Mr. Barnhill wrote he had decided to step away from the case and would ask Georgia's Attorney General's office to pick another prosecutor. Mr. Barnhill also wrote that he did not believe there was evidence of a crime, noting that Georgia, Gregory McMichael, and his son had been legally carrying the weapons in the Georgia law. Because Mr. Arbery was a burglary suspect, code for black, the pursuers had solid first-hand probable cause, were justified in chasing him under state citizens arrest law. In a separate document, Mr. Barnhill stated that video exists of Mr. Arbery burglarizing home immediately preceding the chase and confrontation. In the letter to the police, he cites a separate video of the shooting filmed by her pursuer. Mr. Barnhill said this video, which has not been made public. Oh, okay, so this video, which would give a substantial amount of different evidence, has not been shown. We're just told about it. That's very convenient. Shows Mr. Arbery attacking Travis McMichael after he and his father pulled up to him in their truck. Again, these are always so convenient. This evidence which would clear them and show that they would defend themselves is never released. Just like police body cameras. They just tell you what was on it, not what the actual information was. The video shows Mr. Arbery trying to grab the shotgun from Travis McMichael's hand, Mr. Barnhill wrote, and that he argued amounts to self-defense under Georgia law. Travis McMichael, Mr. Barnhill concluded, was allowed to use deadly force to protect himself. How about this? A black man in Georgia saw two white men in a truck driving towards him with a gun, and he feared for his life and was trying to defend himself because he thought they were going to kill him, like they eventually did. That makes more sense. He noted it was possible that Mr. Arbery had caused the gun to go off by pulling on it and pointed to Mr. Arbery's mental health records and prior convictions, which he said help explain his apparent aggressive nature. Again, and his possible thought pattern to attack an armed man. Again, maybe he feared for his life and didn't want to wait for their mercy. After Mr. Barnhill recused himself, the case was assigned to Tom Durden in the city of Hinesville, Georgia, who must now decide whether to present the case to a grand jury for possible indictments. In an interview last week, Mr. Durden said his team had begun reviewing the evidence. We don't know anything about the case, he said. We don't have any preconceived idea about it. What a load of bullshit. You just came up with a whole bunch of preconceived notions. The police report is based almost solely upon the responding officer's interview with Gregory McMichael, who had worked at the police department from 1982 to 1989. Loads of biases there. The responding officer describes him as a witness. According to a report, Mr. McMichael told the officer that his son pulled up near Mr. Arbery, that his son got out of the truck with a shotgun, and his son and Mr. Arbery then fought over the weapons, at which point Travis fired a shot, and a second later there was a second shot. Michael J. Moore, an Atlanta lawyer who formerly served as U.S. Attorney in Georgia, reviewed Mr. Barnell's letter to the Glynn County Police Department as well as the initial police report at the request of the Times. In an interview, Mr. Moore called Mr. Barnhill's opinion flawed. In his view, Mr. Moore said that McMichaels appeared to be the aggressors in the confrontation, and such aggressors were not justified in using force under Georgia's self-defense laws. The law does not allow a group of people to form an armed posse and chase down an unarmed person who they believe might have possibly been the perpetrator of a past crime. Nearly 2 months after the shooting, residents of Satilla Shores remained on guard. One woman angrily asked what a reporter was up to, and another approached almost immediately with similar questions, announcing that she was armed and she had notified the police. Mr. Vaughan, the football coach, said on Sunday that he and other activists had come up with a plan to keep the pressure on the authorities. They plan to drive to Mr. Durden's office in Hinesville, he said, about an hour away. They will mark up spots on the sidewalk so they will remain several feet apart, and they will enter the building one by one to ask why the men who chased Mr. Arbery have not been arrested. Now, first off, this article, I think, is just a hit job. It reminds me of what Malcolm X said, that the media has the power to make the victim into the criminal and the criminal into the victim. And this is clearly what they're doing, dragging up things that he's done years ago, and this whole thing, a black man in a white shirt. So basically, they didn't describe any facial features or anything, just a very vague description and say, well, that justifies, and over a burglary. You know, nobody's been harmed in any of these so-called burglaries that they're talking about, yet is justified to chase him down long after, and not simply just tell the police the description and go after him. They had to lynch him. Anyway, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.